Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're venturing back into the X-Files. But this time, we're not mapping out, those sprawling conspiracies the show's known for. We're taking a magnifying glass to one episode in particular, a real, standalone Monster of the Week kind of deal. It's Season 3, Episode 5, The List.
Oh, an excellent choice. You've got a great collection of material here. I mean, the story itself, the behind-the-scenes stuff, there's so much to uncover with this one.
Yeah. For anyone who might be new to the X-Files world, the show follows these two FBI agents, Fox Mulder, he's all in on the paranormal, and Dana Scully, the scientist who needs to see it to believe it. Basically, they tackle cases that are, well, let's just say, unexplained. And The List, which first hit TV screens back in October of '95, it throws us right into this really creepy premise. We're talking about a death row inmate, Napoleon Nietzsche Manley, who just seconds before his execution promises to come back with a vengeance.
Right from the start, it sets a really dark tone. And it's amazing how quickly Mulder and Scully get pulled into this whole thing. I mean, almost right after Nietzsche's execution, they find a prison guard dead in Nietzsche's old cell. And the circumstances are just not normal.
Yeah, super suspicious. And Warden Brodeur, he's running the prison. He thinks right away that there's some kind of conspiracy going on. Like, Nietzsche planned this from inside, maybe with help from the outside. He's looking for, a human explanation.
But then we hear from John Speranza, another inmate.
Yeah.
And he's got a very different take on things. He thinks Nietzsche actually came back, like he promised. This is where that whole paranormal element kicks in. And of course, that's right up Mulder's alley.
And then things get seriously messed up and fast. Another guard, Fournier, he's found dead, decapitated, and they find his head in a paint can. And get this, there's already larvae on it. It's such a disturbing image, really sets the tone for this whole creepy, horrific episode.
Definitely. And then finding those green bottlefly larvae in the first guard's lungs, that just adds another layer of creepiness. I mean, it points to super fast decomposition, which makes you think maybe something unnatural is at play here.
As Scully digs into the investigation, she runs into another guard, Vincent Parmalee, and he brings up this name that sends shivers down your spine, Roque. This inmate, he supposedly has a list of Nietzsche's intended victims, and this list, it becomes this ominous presence hanging over everything.
And Mulder, naturally, he goes looking for Roque. Roque being, a savvy inmate, he's like, okay, I'll tell you what's on this list, but only if you get me transferred out of here. And Warden Brodeur, he's not having it. No deals with prisoners, especially in this crazy situation.
And things got even darker, wouldn't you say? Brodeur finds Fournier's headless body in his own office. Now that's a real power move, Whatever's happening, it's getting way too personal. Meanwhile, Mulder's been looking into Nietzsche's background and finds out he was really into reincarnation, which, goes totally against Scully's whole scientific mindset.
It's that classic Mulder and Scully clash, right? Mulder's looking for answers in the paranormal, while Scully sticks to logic and hard evidence. And then there's Nietzsche's widow, Danielle Manley. She has this whole other layer of intrigue, especially when we find out about her secret affair with Parmalee. She just seems so terrified.
Yeah. And that whole list thing, it takes a dark turn when Roque actually says he's the fifth name on it. And then Brodeur beats him to death in the showers. Brutal. Makes you think, maybe Brodeur's trying to hide something.
Yeah, he's definitely on edge. That whole scene, it paints him in a different light. He puts the whole prison on lockdown and tells Mulder about the bad blood between Nietzsche and the dead guards. But Mulder, he's not buying it. He doesn't really think Roque was on that original list.
Mulder's got good instincts, as always. He wants to know who executed Nietzsche. Turns out it was a volunteer named Perry Simon. And guess what? They find Simon's body at his home, already decomposing. This means whatever's happening, it's not confined to the prison anymore.
Exactly. It's like whatever force is at play, it's breaking out into the world. Mulder goes back to Speranza, and Speranza is adamant that Roque wasn't on the list. He even says he saw Nietzsche himself outside his cell. So the whole supernatural angle just gets stronger.
Scully, though, she's focusing on what she can prove. She's looking at phone records and starts to think maybe Nietzsche's lawyer, Danny Cherez, and Speranza are working together, pulling the strings from the outside. Like a classic real-world conspiracy.
But that theory goes right out the window when Cherez, after telling Mulder and Scully about Danielle's affair, gets suffocated by, well, it looks a lot like Nietzsche. That scene just blurs the lines, makes it hard for even Scully to deny that something supernatural might be going on.
Warden Brodeur, he's desperate to stop the killings. So he offers Speranza a deal, a commuted sentence, if he can make the murder stop. I mean, talk about a high-stakes gamble.
And then we see Parmalee and Danielle. She's obviously freaking out, especially with Mulder and Scully watching them. The agents are convinced it's Parmalee, so they go to tell Brodeur. But while they're gone, things go south.
Danielle sees someone at her door and in all the panic thinks it's Nietzsche. She shoots and kills Parmalee. Just a terrible fear-driven reaction to this whole nightmare.
And Brodeur, he's still stuck on the idea that Cheres and Parmalee were the remaining targets. So he thinks Speranza broke their deal and orders him killed in the showers. Even though Speranza is yelling that there's still one person left on the list, then they just pin all the murders on Parmalee. Case closed, right?
Not so fast. Mulder's not convinced. As they're leaving, he points out all these things that don't add up. Like, Parmalee was only on duty for one of the murders, and he wouldn't have known about the executioner, Simon. And he keeps saying that Roque being on the list doesn't make sense. For Mulder, it's clear Nietzsche really did come back.
Scully tries to convince him it's over, that they have their answer, even if it's a disturbing one.
Yeah.
But then, oh man, that ending. Brodeur's driving by, and you see this fly in his rearview mirror, and for a second it looks like Nietzsche's face. And then the fly, or whatever it is, attacks Brodeur. His car crashes. It looks like Nietzsche got his final victim.
That ending is so open-ended, isn't it? It doesn't really tell us what happened. Was it Nietzsche's ghost or some weird psychological revenge plot? It leaves you wondering.
And that's what makes it so powerful. It makes you think about, life and death and revenge and the things we just can't explain. Now let's talk about some of the cool behind-the-scenes stuff about The List.
Okay. This is where things get even more interesting. The List is special because it was the first episode where Chris Carter, the guy who created The X-Files, wrote and directed it himself. That tells you he had a very specific vision for this story. He wanted it to be, more raw and violent, different from the usual mythology episodes.
And you can definitely see that when you watch it. It has this really intense, almost visceral feeling. Plus, they actually filmed a lot of those prison scenes in a real decommissioned maximum security prison near Vancouver. Talk about atmosphere. I mean, those walls must have held so much history, so much tension.
Oh, yeah. And the whole idea of the list, the reincarnation thing, the revenge, that wasn't just made up. Carter got that from actual prison folklore, the superstitions they have in those places. It's fascinating how real-life beliefs, even, the creepy ones, can inspire such a chilling story.
It gives the story this grounded feeling, even though it's supernatural. And speaking of grounded and creepy, we have to talk about the maggot scene.
Oh, man, that scene. It's so memorable, but in a really disturbing way. Hundreds of thousands of real maggots, not CGI, real ones.
Yeah.
And the actor, he had to lie there while they crawled all over him. I heard Gillian Anderson, she wasn't too happy about it, and I don't blame her.
I can only imagine. That kind of commitment to practical effects, though, it made that scene so much more impactful. You can't forget it. And Carter, he intentionally made it feel like those old revenge horror movies from the 70s, like The Omen, or even that movie Prison from '87. The slow pacing, the dark lighting, those bursts of gore. It's classic horror.
Even Napoleon Manley, he was kind of based on real people. Guys like Malcolm X and George Jackson. These were smart, powerful black men who, became radicalized in prison. Carter wanted to create a character who was both bad and a product of the system, someone who's morally complex. That adds a whole other layer to the episode, something to think about beyond just the horror.
That's what makes good storytelling, right? Those deeper layers. And it's true, The X-Files is usually about aliens and conspiracies, but The List, it goes into this whole spiritual horror thing with the reincarnation idea. It's different, but it works.
And even though the whole episode is so dark, you still get those little bits of Mulder's dry humor. The way David Duchovny delivers those lines, it's just classic Mulder. I always love the part where he says it would be poetic justice if the guy sentenced to death came back and killed 5 people. That mix of dark and funny is so him.
It's a much-needed break from all the darkness.
Yeah.
And then there's Danielle, Meech's widow. She's such a mystery, right? Was she in on it? Was she manipulated? And her thing with Parmalee, it just makes it all even more suspicious. It's funny, you mentioned Red Shoe Diaries. Duchovny was in that, right? So maybe it's a little nod to that.
Could be. And you got to remember, back in '95 when The List aired, it was pretty intense for network TV. I mean, you had decapitation, real bugs crawling on people, even the electric chair scene. It was one of the most graphic X-Files episodes up to that point. They were definitely pushing the boundaries, showing they weren't afraid to go dark.
Yeah, and that opening scene started with the execution instead of a dead body. That sets the whole mood right away. It's all about vengeance for the very first frame.
And we talked about the social commentary, right? They don't just make Nietzsche out to be a pure villain. He's a product of the system. He did bad things, But he was also failed by that system.
Hmm.
It makes his revenge feel less black and white,
Yeah.
more complicated.
Exactly. It makes you think about the bigger picture. And the critics back then, they were kind of divided. Some thought it was great, others not so much. But the horror fans, they loved it for its atmosphere and, the moral questions it raises.
That makes sense. It's definitely not your typical X-Files episode. And that whole thing with Nietzsche saying 5 people will die, it creates this feeling of dread, like a clock ticking down with every death, keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Oh, and fun fact, the actor who played the maggot guy, David Fredericks, he actually ended up being in a bunch more X-Files episodes and even some Millennium episodes. Guess you could say he got used to the creepy stuff after that experience.
Yeah, a real trial by fire, or should I say maggots. And
Yeah.
going back to that ending, the fact that we never really know for sure what happened with Nietzsche, whether he was really back or it was all some elaborate psychological thing, that's classic Chris Carter. He wants you to keep thinking about it long after the episode's over.
Totally. It's all about those unanswered questions. And then that last scene, another prisoner on death row, just before his execution, he whispers, "I have a list." It's like a full circle moment,
Yeah.
suggesting that this cycle of revenge, it never really ends.
So to sum it up, The List is a really chilling standalone story in the whole X-Files universe.
Yeah.
It mixes horror with these themes of revenge and the unknown, and then you add in all the behind-the-scenes stuff like the real prison, the super realistic special effects, Carter's unique vision as a director, and it just makes the whole episode even more fascinating.
It definitely does. And it leaves us with this question for you, our listener. Given all the mystery surrounding Nietzsche's return and all those real-world inspirations we talked about, what do you think really happened in The List? Was it truly supernatural, something beyond our understanding? Or was it more about the dark side of human nature, the desire for revenge, the power of fear and manipulation?
Something to think about. And if this deep dive got you curious, we encourage you to go back and watch The List again. Or maybe look into some of that real-life prison folklore that might have inspired it. You never know what chilling connections you might find.
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the darker side of the X-Files. Until next time.